Cuba cancels May Day parade amid fuel shortages. It's the first time since Havana's 1959 revolution that the event has been called off for economic reasons. Cuba's annual May Day parade, which was due to take place on Monday to mark International Workers' Day, has been called off by the island's communist government as acute fuel shortages severely disrupt Havana's economic equilibrium. The annual celebrations usually see hundreds of thousands of Cubans descend on the capital's Revolution Square to participate in festivities to mark the Socialist Workers' Holiday, which commemorates the country's labor movement. It has only ever been cancelled in 2020 and 2021, during the COVID-19 pandemic. The island nation has been gripped by severe shortages at the gas pump this year, with some motorists reporting in recent weeks that they have been sleeping in their cars in gas station lines that can last for several days just to get gasoline. "We still don't have a clear idea of how we are going to get out of this," President Miguel Diaz-Canel said in April about plummeting fuel reserves, according to the New York Times. Cuba uses between 500 to 600 tons of fuel each day, but current stocks allow for only about 400 tons per day to be distributed. A weakened economy has presented additional stumbling blocks, namely a reduced capacity to import diluents to refine low-quality crude oil. Since 2000, Cuba has held a barter agreement with Venezuela in which crude oil is imported to Havana in exchange for educated doctors, teachers, and government workers, but this relationship has been strained in recent years as Caracas struggles to manage its own fuel shortfalls. This year alone, Venezuela's oil exports to Havana have dropped to 55,000 barrels per day from almost 80,000 bpd in 2020. For the last 2 decades, Venezuela has been losing that revenue by not selling that oil on the international market, Jorge Piñon, who heads an energy and environment program at the University of Texas, told The Guardian. "I think they've just come to a point where they can no longer provide cash-free oil to the Cubans." Sanctions imposed on Havana by the Trump administration, and largely maintained by Joe Biden, were designed to exert maximum pressure on the island amid Washington's extended trade embargo against Cuba. The Cuban leadership has blamed the combined influence of the U.S. sanctions and the pandemic as being a crippling influence on its economic lifeline, tourism. "There's little work, as there's little tourism, and you can't work much as you have to save fuel," Yusvel Sosa Vargas, a driver for tourists, told the New York Times last month. "Now is not the time for Ukraine to join NATO," member states president. Lithuania's Gitanas Naustas said Kiev should not be admitted to the military alliance until its conflict with Moscow is over. Ukraine's aspirations of NATO membership should not materialize while the country remains locked in a military conflict with Russia, Lithuanian President Gitanas Naustas has said. He noted, however, that a definite roadmap should be developed by midsummer for Kiev's eventual accession. In an interview with Italy's La Repubblica published on Saturday, Naustas said letting Ukraine join the US-led military bloc right now would be too difficult. The leadership in Kiev is also well aware of this fact, he added. Instead, the alliance needs to define stages and formulae of how to act after the conflict is over, Naustas continued. He expressed hope that this could be done during the NATO summit in Vilnius on July 11 and 12, 2023. He acknowledged that the issue of Ukraine's possible accession will be the most complicated element to deal with during the event. According to the Lithuanian head of state, some member states are still reluctant to send strong signals to Ukraine. Last week, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius asserted that this is now not the time to decide on Ukraine's possible future within NATO. Echoing the Lithuanian president, he said this issue could be carefully considered only after Kiev succeeds in repelling this attack. The decision should be made with a cold head and hot heart, and not the other way round, he stated. Around the same time, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban tweeted what? In response to an article reporting NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg's remarks in Kiev last Thursday. During a joint press conference with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, the military bloc's chief said, Ukraine's rightful place is in the Euro-Atlantic family. Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO. Stoltenberg added that, over time, our support will help to make this possible. However, he stopped short of offering any timeframe for Ukraine's possible accession to the alliance. Commenting on Stoltenberg's remarks, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov stressed that preventing Ukraine from joining NATO remains one of the key goals of Russia's military campaign against its neighbor. Explaining the need for military action against Ukraine last February, President Vladimir Putin cited the country's possible accession to the alliance as one of the reasons for the move. Fighting continues in Khartoum as thousands more evacuate from Sudan. As foreign countries continue to evacuate their citizens from Sudan by land, sea, and air, Sudanese citizens report gunfire and heavy artillery fire in parts of Khartoum on Saturday. The military activity continues amid the extension of a ceasefire between the country's two top generals, warring with each other for power. Hundreds of Sudanese civilians thronged the borders as renewed warnings grow louder of the wider instability to come if the fighting does not stop. At least 528 people have been killed and 4,599 wounded, with the United Nations saying it believes the real toll is much higher. At least 75,000 people have been internally displaced by the fighting, the UN said. Satellite views shows buses gathered at the Arkin border crossing into Egypt. The UK said Saturday 1,888 people were airlifted to safety in its evacuation effort, while the U.S. State Department reported hundreds of Americans reached Port Sudan safely in its first evacuation on Saturday. The U.S. earlier received criticism from families of Americans in Sudan for initially ruling out any U.S.-run evacuation. The first charter flight carrying more than 340 Chinese nationals evacuated from Sudan arrived in Beijing on Saturday morning. Archaeologists find Arabian Stonehenge in Oman desert. Researchers from the Czech Republic, US, Great Britain, Ukraine, Iran, Italy, Slovakia, Austria, France, and Oman participated in the Arduk, Archaeological Landscape and Environmental Dynamics of Duk and Nejd expedition and made several prominent discoveries. An international team of archaeologists uncovered a treasure trove of ancient artifacts in Oman, chief among them signs that point to a so-called Arabian Stonehenge. Other findings made by the team of excavators include hand axes and circular burial chambers. The discoveries were made during the team's third excavation season in Oman, where more expeditions are already planned. The hand axes are particularly significant as they date back to between 300,000 and 1.3 million years ago, making them some of the oldest tools ever found in the region. It's speculated they were likely used by early humans who migrated out of Africa and into Asia, thus providing valuable insights into the evolution of the human species. The circular burial chambers have also proved fascinating, with some items containing multiple skeletons arranged in a specific pattern. Officials have noted the arrangement suggests a complex burial ritual was practiced during this time period, and that the people who lived in this area had a sophisticated understanding of death and the afterlife. The detected interactions of African and Arab archaeological cultures characterize the mobility of populations of anatomically modern humans. It will be interesting to confront these findings also with the genetic diversity of the two regions and create a more comprehensive view of the formation of contemporary society in southern Arabia, explained evolutionary anthropologist Viktor Kearney. In addition to these discoveries, the Czech archaeologists also found a collection of rock engravings that depict animals, humans, and abstract symbols. These engravings provide a glimpse into the artistic and cultural practices of the people who lived in this area thousands of years ago. Perhaps the most intriguing discovery, however, is what is being referred to as the Arabian Stonehenge, which consists of a series of triliths that are arranged in a circular pattern. Triliths have two upright stones with a third stone placed across the top, and are around 2,000 years old. However, their purpose is not yet clear. Some experts believe they may have been used for astronomical observations, or as part of a religious ritual. What we find here is unique in the context of the whole of southern Arabia. A megalithic structure concealing two circular burial chambers revealed the skeletal remains of at least several dozen individuals. Isotopic analyses of bones, teeth, and shells will help us learn more about the diet, natural environment, and migrations of the buried population, Alzbeta Danilasova, from the Institute of Archaeology of the KA in Prague, explained in a release. Overall, the discoveries are expected to contribute significantly to the understanding of the earliest history of the Arabian Desert. Our findings, supported by 4 different dating methods, will provide valuable data for reconstructing the climate and history of the world's largest sand desert. Natural conditions also shaped prehistoric settlements, and what we are trying to do is study human adaptability to climate change, said expedition leader and coordinator Roman Gabra from the Institute of Archaeology of the KA in Prague. Ancient Biden mocks age critics. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump were among president's political punching bags on Saturday at annual Washington dinner. U.S. President Joe Biden cracked jokes at the expense of his foes as he addressed what is considered to be one of his key political fragilities, his advancing age, during Saturday's annual White House Correspondents' Association dinner. "I believe in the First Amendment, not just because my good friend Jimmy Madison wrote it," the 80-year-old Biden, the oldest-serving president in the history of the U.S., told an audience of Washington's political and media elite. Madison, the 4th U.S. president sometimes referred to as a father of the U.S. Constitution, died in 1836. Biden continued, "Look, I get that age is a completely reasonable issue. It's in everybody's mind, and by everyone, I mean the New York Times." Headline: Biden's advanced age is a big issue. Trump's, however, is not. Earlier this month, Biden confirmed that he is to seek re-election to the White House, in a race that may turn out to be a rematch of the contentious 2020 election campaign which pitted him against then-President Donald Trump, who is 76. However, polling has indicated a sizable percentage of Americans have little appetite for a second Biden term, with many respondents citing his age as a major contributing factor. But, despite this, Biden refused to dance around the issue. "They say I'm ancient, they say I'm wise, they say I'm over the hill," Don Lemon would say that's a man in his prime. Former CNN anchor Lemon was fired earlier this month following several controversial on-air moments, including suggesting that another candidate for the Republican presidential nomination, 51-year-old Nikki Haley, isn't in her prime. Biden also used the Correspondents' Association dinner, traditionally presented as a tongue-in-cheek event designed to poke fun at the Washington establishment, to deliver a series of scathing remarks to a host of his more vocal opponents. "I want everybody to have fun tonight," Biden said. "But please be safe. If you find yourself disoriented or confused, it's either you're drunk or Marjorie Taylor Greene," he said, referring to the far-right Republican congresswoman from Georgia. Donald Trump, Biden's chief political critic, didn't escape his successor's crosshairs as the incumbent joked that he'd been offered $10 to keep his speech brief. "That's a switch, a president being offered hush money," he quipped. The black-tie dinner returned to the Washington calendar last year after it was postponed in both 2020 and 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2022, Biden was the first U.S. president to speak at the event in 6 years, after then-President Donald Trump repeatedly refused invitations to attend. Spain, Portugal smash April temperature records. Mainland Spain and Portugal have broken temperature records for April, officials said on Friday, as both countries wilt in an unusually early heat wave that has increased the risk of wildfires. The mercury reached 38.8 degrees Celsius, 101.8 degrees Fahrenheit, at the airport in Spain's southern city of Córdoba on Thursday, surpassing the previous record of 38.6 degrees Celsius in the eastern city of Elche, according to the National Weather Office EMET. This provisional data must still be confirmed, a process that can take several days, a spokesperson for the agency said. The highest temperature for all of Spain in the month of April, however, was recorded in 2013 in the Canary Islands off the northwest coast of Africa when the mercury reached 40.2 degrees Celsius. In neighboring Portugal, temperatures in the central town of Moura reached 36.9 degrees Celsius on Thursday, surpassing the record of 36 degrees Celsius set in April 1945 in the northeastern town of Pinhao, according to the weather agency IPMA. While temperatures began to decrease in Portugal on Friday, the scorching heat persisted in much of Spain, with the mercury reaching 36 degrees Celsius in Córdoba. The unusually early heat wave has been driven by a mass of very hot and dry air coming from Africa, coupled with a slow-moving weather system. A high-pressure weather system plus clear skies over the Iberian Peninsula are allowing more sunshine to reach the ground, which is already so dry that it cannot evaporate the heat. The scorching temperatures have prompted warnings about the high risk of wildfires and worsened drought conditions that have already led some farmers in Spain to not sow seeds this year. The Spanish government said it would launch its forest fire monitoring campaign on Friday, a month and a half earlier than usual due to the early arrival of scorching temperatures. This will involve adding reinforcements to local firefighting teams and the continuous monitoring of forest fires across the country, the Interior Ministry said in a statement. Blazes have already ravaged some 54,000 hectares of land so far this year in Spain, compared with just over 17,000 hectares during the same time in 2022, according to the European Forest Fire Information System. Last year, Spain experienced its hottest year since records began, with UN figures suggesting nearly 75% of its land is susceptible to desertification due to climate change. Water reservoirs are at half their capacity nationally, and the COAG Farmers Union says 60% of farmland is suffocating from lack of rainfall. Spain is the world's largest exporter of olive oil and a key source of fruits and vegetables in Europe. Experts say climate change driven by human activity is boosting the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events, such as heat waves, droughts, and wildfires. First Chinese world chess champion crowned. A roller coaster match ended with Ding Liren winning the title. Chinese Grandmaster Ding Liren prevailed over Russia's Ian Nepomniachtchi on Sunday in a tiebreak to win what has been hailed as perhaps the most exciting World Chess Championship match in a generation. With the score deadlocked at a 7-7 tie after 14 grueling classical games, the final of which on Saturday clocked in at 6.5 hours, the action shifted to a series of 4 shorter games to break the tie. Had a winner still not emerged, a series of 2 blitz games would have ensued. The first 3 games ended in a draw, with neither player able to muster significant winning chances. In Game 4, however, Ding managed to seize the initiative with the black pieces. But Nepomniachtchi fought back and double-edged play followed, with the Russian eschewing an opportunity to steer the game toward a clear draw and thus a final blitz tiebreak. When nothing subsequently materialized for Nepomniachtchi, he appeared to choose a perpetual check line, a technique whereby a player repeats a series of checks on the opponent's king but without being able to make any progress. With less than 2 minutes on his clock and a world title on the line, Ding declined the repetition and played an unexpected and brave move that pinned his own rook to his king, but in doing so deprived his opponent of further checks. With 2 passed pawns as compensation for a less safe king, Ding played with razor-sharp precision and managed to push his pawns while denying Nepomniachtchi counterplay. After Ding successfully parried one final shot of desperation from Nepomniachtchi, the Russian extended his hand in resignation. A stunned Ding, overcome with emotion, was unable to stand up from the board. Ding's journey to becoming China's first ever world chess champion and the first new title holder since 2013 was a most improbable one. He only qualified for the candidates tournament, the round robin that determines who takes on the defending champion, after Russian Grandmaster Sergei Karjakin was removed. However, because pandemic restrictions in China had left him short of the required number of rated games, he was forced to embark on a punishing schedule of tournaments hastily arranged by the Chinese Chess Federation. In the candidates tournament, meanwhile, Ding finished second, to Nepomniachtchi, and was only catapulted into the championship match when 5-time world champion Magnus Carlsen opted not to defend his title. The absence of Carlsen, who has dominated professional chess for the last decade, was initially seen as diminishing the stature of the match. However, as Ding and Nepomniachtchi traded blow for blow and thrilled viewers with tense and topsy-turvy games. The encounter was increasingly seen as what former world champion Viswanathan Anand called a match for the ages. Nepomniachtchi, who was making his second straight appearance in the world title match after squaring off with Carlsen in Dubai in 2021, saw his bid to join a long list of Soviet and Russian world champions fall agonizingly short. Ding will pocket €1.2 million, more than $1.3 million, for prevailing in the match, while Nepomniachtchi, as runner-up, will take home €800,000. Extreme heatwave consuming Spain, Portugal melts April temp records. In light of the current heat wave and rising wildfire concerns among Spanish authorities, Spain's government started its Wildfire Watch campaign on Friday, a month and a half earlier than usual. Scorching temperatures enveloping Spain and Portugal put the month of April in the record books as both nations underwent a severe early heat wave that has since prompted fears of potential wildfires in the region. New records saw Spain's Córdoba reach a sweat-inducing 38.8 degrees Celsius and Portugal's Moura hit an astounding 36.9 C. The heat wave is thought to be the result of a mass of hot and dry air from Africa, which has not only increased the risk of wildfires in both countries but potential droughts. The current weather conditions are particularly worrying as Spain experienced its hottest year on record last year, with climate change causing almost 75% of the country's land to be at risk of desertification. This means that the land is becoming increasingly arid, with vegetation dying off and soil becoming less fertile, making it harder for farmers to grow crops and for animals to graze. In addition to the environmental impact, the heat wave is also raising the risk to public health as high temps can lead to heat exhaustion and heat stroke, particularly in vulnerable groups such as the elderly and young children. The situation has become so dire at present that schools in Spain are being forced to change timetables because of the heat. Public transportation schedules in the Spanish capital of Madrid have also been upped so as to ensure trains are running more frequently and prevent delays. Spain's public swimming pools are also expected to open a month earlier so local residents can use the facilities so keep cool. The previous high April record for mainland Spain dates back to 2011 and was recorded in Elche at 38.6 degrees. This record, however, is not an absolute record for the whole of Spain. In fact, the highest temperature reading was recorded in 2013 in the Canary Islands, located off the northwest coast of Africa. It was set at 40.2 degrees. Iraqi leaders pledged to strengthen ties, cooperation. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei said on Saturday the expansion of cooperation between Iran and Iraq and the implementation of previously signed bilateral agreements serve the common interests of both sides, according to the official news agency IRNA. He made the remarks in a meeting with visiting Iraqi President Abdul Latif Rashid, also attended by Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi, in Tehran. The top leader stressed that Iraq's progress and prosperity are very important to Iran, adding that Iran will stand by Iraq and wish to see it make further progress. He added that the unity between the two countries cannot be affected by external political factors, calling for joint efforts to protect and further the bilateral ties. The Iraqi president, for his part, said the relations between Tehran and Baghdad are continuous and strong and the bilateral cooperation is carried out in diversified dimensions and different sectors. Earlier in the day, Raisi said at a joint press conference that Tehran and Baghdad are determined to further develop the bilateral relations after meeting with Iraqi high-ranking delegations led by Rashid. Raisi said relations between Tehran and Baghdad are strategic, noting that the two countries can further increase their current over $10 billion annual trade volume. He confirmed that the bilateral cooperation in sectors of infrastructure, water, electricity, gas, and energy will be strengthened. Raisi slammed that the presence of foreign troops, particularly Americans in Iraq, only compromises regional security, adding the United States seeks solely its own interests. The Iranian president expressed hope that Rashid's visit would be a turning point in efforts to further develop bilateral ties. For his part, Rashid called for greater cooperation with Iran in the field of fighting narcotics trade. Rashid also congratulated Iran on the rapprochement between Tehran and Riyadh, noting that the step will contribute to improving regional security. Leading non-Western states resisting U.S. pressure over Russia, WaPo. Countries are trying to sit out the standoff between Washington, Moscow, and Beijing, leaked documents seen by the paper suggest. India, Brazil, South Africa, and Pakistan and numerous other emerging economies have rebuffed American attempts to enlist them in the fight against Russia amid the conflict in Ukraine, The Washington Post has reported, citing leaked Pentagon files. According to classified U.S. intelligence documents, which investigators believe were released online by U.S. Air National Guard serviceman Jack Teixeira, India has no intention of taking sides in the standoff over Ukraine, the paper reported on Saturday. One of the documents seen by the Post suggests that during a meeting in February, Indian National Security Advisor Ajit Kumar Doval told the Secretary of the Russian Security Council, Nikolai Patrushev, that New Delhi was resisting pressure to support a Western-backed UN resolution on Ukraine. India would not deviate from the principled position it had taken in the past, Doval reportedly assured the Russian official. Another leaked file suggested that Brazil was more interested in playing a mediation role in the conflict than supporting Washington and its allies. Russia favors the idea of a world peace bloc to resolve the crisis over Ukraine, put forward by Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva during his visit to China earlier this month. Moscow believes it would counteract the West's aggressor-victim narrative about Kiev, according to the document. In late February, Brazil welcomed 2 warships from America's arch-foe Iran, with one of the flies suggesting that Lula likely allowed the port call to bolster his reputation as a global mediator and burnish Brazil's image as a neutral power. The leaks also revealed that when U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited South Africa last year and raised the Ukraine issue, he was told by local officials that Pretoria would not be bullied into making decisions that go against its interests, The Washington Post wrote. An intelligence file from February 17 reportedly described discussions between Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif and his subordinate about an upcoming UN vote on Ukraine. It said the aide pointed out to the premier that support for the Western-sponsored resolution would signal a shift in Islamabad's position, after its earlier abstention on a similar draft. Such a move would jeopardize important trade and energy deals with Russia, he warned, as cited by the Post. Pakistan was among 23 abstaining nations when the vote at the UN General Assembly took place a week later. As for Central Asian countries, their leaders were eager to work with whoever offers the most immediate deliverables, which for now is China, another leaked document, seen by the newspaper, suggested. Pyongyang deplores South Korean president's visit to U.S., accuses sides of provoking war. North Korean state media said on Sunday that the visit of South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol to the United States was a provocation and a typical display of hostile policy regarding Pyongyang, and in fact makes a nuclear war against North Korea a fact accomplishment. On Wednesday, the leaders of South Korea and the U.S. adopted the Washington Declaration that provides for the establishment of a regular bilateral consultation mechanism on extended deterrence and strategic planning. South Korea also secured a U.S. promise to promptly deploy the entire force of the alliance, including nuclear weapons, in the event of a nuclear attack by North Korea. Washington also assured Seoul it would use all measures, including nuclear weapons, in the case of aggression from Pyongyang, and promised to send nuclear missile submarines to the Korean peninsula. This trip, aimed to draw up a sinister plan between the master and the stooge to annihilate the DPRK North Korea, is the most hostile, aggressive, and provocative. Dangerous trip for a nuclear war. The Washington Declaration on raising the practicality of the extended deterrence provided by the U.S. is a typical product of the heinous hostile policy towards the DPRK, North Korean media stated. The agency said that deterrence of North Korea was the main subject of the president's meeting. Creating a consultative group on Seoul's and Washington's nuclear issues, extended deployment of U.S. strategic assets, including nuclear submarines, on the Korean peninsula, and strengthening extended deterrence by intensification of joint military drills makes a nuclear war against North Korea a fact accomplishment. For the first time, North Korea was openly called a target for a nuclear strike, the media stressed. The traitor Yoon's visit to the U.S. made it possible to reconfirm the hostile intention of the U.S. and the puppets, which can never be changed but has become more reckless. This shows that the DPRK should neither hesitate nor stop for even a little and even a moment to become stronger and more thoroughly prepared. The dangerous nuclear war movies of the U.S. and the puppet group running amok in stifling the DPRK while denying its existence can never be pardoned. And they will have to pay dearly for their rash acts, it said. On Saturday, North Korean President Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, who serves as a deputy head of the Central Committee of the ruling Workers' Party, said that the Washington Declaration would deteriorate global safety. She denounced U.S. President Joe Biden's comment that any nuclear attack by Pyongyang on the U.S. or its allies would end in a regime change in North Korea as the words of an old man with no future. The South Korean Ministry of Unification criticized her statement as rude and far-fetched. Korean leader considers Washington Declaration better than NATO agreements, spokesman. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol considers the Washington Declaration adopted during his meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden to be more effective than multilateral agreements within NATO since it outlines detailed obligations regarding the defense of one particular country. Presidential spokesman Lee Do-woon said. The president explained that the Washington Declaration is more effective than multilateral agreements within NATO since it was adopted one-on-one. And it is the first time when the concept of extended deterrence was set out in a written document with a certain country rather than as an oral statement, the spokesman said. On Wednesday, the leaders of South Korea and the U.S. adopted the Washington Declaration that provides for the establishment of a regular bilateral consultation mechanism called the US-South Korean Nuclear Consultative Group on Extended Deterrence and Strategic Planning. South Korea also secured a U.S. promise to promptly deploy the entire force of the alliance, including nuclear weapons, in the event of a nuclear attack by North Korea. The U.S. also assured Seoul it would use all measures, including nuclear weapons, in the case of an aggression from North Korea, and promised to send nuclear missile submarines to the Korean peninsula. On Friday, the South Korean president stated in a speech at Harvard Kennedy School in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that the declaration should be understood as an upgraded version of the 1953 Mutual Defense Treaty signed by Seoul and Washington following the 1950–1953 Korean War. A long-term race. Spain gambles on green hydrogen. Major green energy projects are sprouting up across Spain as it seeks to position itself as a future green energy leader, but experts have urged caution over costs and demand uncertainty. Spanish firms are ramping up production of emissions-free fuel and plowing investment into green energy projects, despite fears over the high price of production. Everything is going very fast, said Miguel Angel Fernandez, technical director at the Spanish National Hydrogen Center, a public research center based in central Spain. There are so many projects, it is impossible to keep track of them all. Most hydrogen is currently produced using polluting fossil fuels, but so-called green hydrogen is made entirely using renewable energy such as wind, solar, and hydropower. While fossil fuels emit harmful greenhouse gases when they burn, hydrogen only emits water vapor. Madrid launched a $1.7 billion plan in 2021 to support green hydrogen projects, using a European Union COVID-19 recovery fund. Spain is now home to 20% of the world's green hydrogen projects, second only to the United States. Last year, Spanish energy giant Iberdrola started operating what it says is the largest green hydrogen plant for industrial use in Europe, in the former mining town of Portolano. The plant uses 100 megawatts of solar panels to produce green hydrogen, which is stored in huge white storage tanks. The initial goal is for it to provide 10% of the energy needed by a neighboring factory belonging to fertilizer maker Fert Iberia. This will prevent the release of 48,000 tons of planet-warming carbon dioxide per year according to Iberdrola. If the pilot project works, Iberdrola will launch a much more important second phase to meet 100% of the fertilizer plant's energy needs, said Javier Plaza, head of Iberdrola's green hydrogen division. Hydrogen Valley. Rival Spanish energy firms such as Cepsa and Repsol have in recent months launched similar projects. In Spain's sunny southern Andalusia region, $3.4 billion is being invested to create a green hydrogen valley where two large factories will produce 300,000 tons of green hydrogen per year from 2027. In the northern region of Asturias, 15 solar power parks will be built by 2030 to enable the annual production of 330,000 tons of green hydrogen. Rafael Cosent, Research Associate Professor in Energy Economics at Madrid's Comillas Pontifical University, said there was an effervescence in the sector, putting Spain in a leading role in green hydrogen production. This is partly due to Spain's abundant sun and wind power capabilities, he added. The Spanish Hydrogen Association estimates there are currently 50 green hydrogen projects under development in the country. Spain could potentially produce enough green hydrogen to cover its own needs and export to Northern Europe, the association argues. Long-term race. A major drawback for green hydrogen, however, has been the high cost of producing it. While the price of the renewable energy used to make it has come down due to technological advances, green hydrogen has still not proven itself to be economically viable. Massive use of green hydrogen will also require complex transformations by vehicles and industrial plants, which make future demand for the fuel uncertain, said Cosent. A green hydrogen economy will need a robust transportation infrastructure to transport it, which Spain is currently lacking. The government is counting on a planned underwater pipeline between Barcelona and Marseille, dubbed H2 Med, which is expected to transport some 2 million metric tons of hydrogen annually. Hydrogen is difficult to contain without leakage, making it challenging to store and transport, so delays to the pipeline are widely expected. But the giants of the green hydrogen market are undeterred. Iberdrola's Plaza said it is important to get into green hydrogen early because whoever starts first has the advantage. We are talking about a long-term race, he added. No rising from ashes, SVB board mulled Project Phoenix to save bank long before collapse. SVB analysts reportedly devised a desperate plan to save the bank in fall 2022, however its spring implementation only fueled the crisis. Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, management discussed the project of selling up to $20 billion in bonds last November under plans to save the company, a British business newspaper has reported, citing newly released documents. According to the report, the board struggled with liquidity long before the collapse in March. The idea behind Project Phoenix was to sell a portfolio of bonds to cover losses. However, authors of the project warned that there is no silver bullet that will solve the problem of increasing deposit outflow, and they forecasted negative investor reaction. This prediction turned out to be true. When management launched security sales in March in a bid to save the troubled bank, the market cap of SVB fell 60% in one day. The next day the bank was seized by regulators and declared bankrupt. The SVB collapse triggered unrest in the banking industry, with Signature Bank coming under control of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporate and First Republic Bank being rescued by a J.P. Morgan Chase-led consortium of financial institutions. The review of the SVB collapse, supervised by economists from the Federal Reserve, implied that the American regulator must make greater emphasis on stress testing of banks with multiple scenarios. This move will allow the capture of a wider range of risk and explore changes to liquidity rules and other reforms that could improve resiliency. China's PMI falls slightly in April. China's Purchasing Managers Index, PMI, for the manufacturing sector was 49.2 in April, down 2.7 index points from last month. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, showed Sunday. The 50-point mark on the index separates expansion and contraction in activity on a monthly basis. The decline was attributed to insufficient market demand and a high comparison base from the rapid recovery of manufacturing in the first quarter, said NBS senior statistician Zhao Qinghe. Nonetheless, PMI for equipment manufacturing remains higher than the 50-point mark. Manufacturing of equipment continues to expand with production index and new orders index both achieving more than 51 index points. China's PMI for the non-manufacturing sector was 56.4 in April, a continued expansion as policies in boosting consumption play out. In particular, services and construction both showed expansion with activity indexes of 55.1 and 63.9, respectively. These data indicate that rapid recovery in consumption and services continue to support economic stability, said Bruce Pang, chief economist and head of research at JLL Greater China. The composite PMI, which includes both manufacturing and non-manufacturing activities, dropped from 57.0 to 54.4 in April. Expanding demand is key to a sustained recovery in the current stage, Pang said. OPEC Plus states to further cut oil production. Overall volume of voluntary output reduction is expected to total 1.66 million barrels per day. Several members of the OPEC Plus group, including Saudi Arabia and Russia, the cartel's two biggest oil producers, have begun reducing crude output. The cuts, starting from May and lasting until the end of 2023, are expected to support global oil prices. In particular, Saudi Arabia and Iraq have started reducing oil production by 500,000 barrels per day, BPD, and 211,000 BPD respectively. Meanwhile, the UAE, Kuwait and Kazakhstan are slashing production of oil by 144,000 BPD, 128,000 BPD, and 78,000 BPD respectively. Algeria and Oman have also joined the voluntary output reduction, with the former cutting production of crude by 48,000 BPD and the latter by 40,000 BPD. Gabon will see its output reduced by 8,000 BPD. Earlier this year, Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak said that Russian producers would extend a voluntary reduction in oil output of 500,000 BPD from the average February level until the end of the current year. The total oil output downfall is expected to amount to 1.66 million barrels per day. The production cuts are aimed at supporting oil prices, which had declined by more than 20% in the 12 months through April 5. The measure is also expected to mitigate the impact on crude oil prices of a sluggish global economy and of the fallout from the banking crisis in the U.S. The latest decision came as an additional step to the agreements to collectively reduce oil output by 2 million BPD that came into effect in November 2022 and came as part of the OPEC Plus deal. Indian banker describes dollar as financial terrorist. Udai Kotak has urged New Delhi to try and make the rupee a reserve currency. The US dollar has too much power as a reserve currency and the world desperately needs an alternative, billionaire investor and CEO of Kotak Mahindra Bank, Udai Kotak, said on Friday. Speaking at the Economic Times Awards for Corporate Excellence 2023, the banker described the dollar as the biggest financial terrorist in the world. As most global assets are held in dollars in so-called nostro accounts with U.S. banks, they are entirely dependent on decisions made by American bankers and authorities, he explained. Somebody in the U.S. can say, you cannot withdraw this money from tomorrow morning, and you are stuck. That is the power of the reserve currency, Kotak added. The world is therefore desperately looking for an alternative reserve currency, he continued, suggesting that India should seize the opportunity to make its own currency, the rupee, the reserve. It is our time for making a shot at it, which will take us probably 10 years, he stated. In order to achieve this goal, India must earn the trust of other global players by building strong financial institutions and a strong framework that is not dependent on the whims and fancies of anyone. Kotak added that he does not see other strong contenders for the role. I don't think Europe can make their currency the reserve, because its states are disunited. I don't think the UK or Japan have the heft to be taking that position, though both the British pound and the yen are free currencies. China, I think, has a major issue of trust with many countries around the world, he said. In a tweet on Saturday, Kotak tried to further clarify his comments on the US dollar, explaining that he was referring to the overabundance of power that a reserve currency holds. This status gives such currency an ability to control global transactions, leading to situations where other countries may become dependent on it. In a recent discussion on the US dollar, I inadvertently used the words financial terrorist, which I would like to correct. What I meant was that a reserve currency has disproportionate power, whether it is a Nostro account, 500 basis points rate increase. Oregon emerging countries holding dollars for liquidity, he wrote. Russian gold production soars. Western sanctions have led to increased demand for safe haven assets in the country. Russian gold miners boosted output by 26.5% year-on-year in March, according to the latest data from the Federal State Statistics Service, Rosstat. Compared to February, gold production jumped by more than 30%. The first quarter figure was 9.1% higher than in the same period of last year. Meanwhile, the production of the key metals silver, platinum, and palladium in Russia rose by 14.1% in March in annual terms, Rosstat data showed. The country's bullion stockpile has also continued to grow over the past year, according to the Bank of Russia. Gold reserves jumped by 1 million ounces over the last year to 74.9 million ounces as of March 1, the CBR reported last month. Demand for gold has been growing among the population as well, with Russians having bought more than 75 tons of investment gold bullion in 2022, according to the Finance Ministry. Last March, the Russian government scrapped the 20% value-added tax on gold for individuals as people rushed to park their savings amid the sweeping Western sanctions. Several months later, the 13% income tax on profits from the sale of gold bars was rescinded as well. Since then, demand for the precious metal in the country has skyrocketed. Majority of U.S. millennials are living paycheck to paycheck, survey finds. From having to afford child care and all the expenses that come from raising children, as well as providing care for aging relatives, millennials are accounting for the majority of Americans who are feeling the financial burn, a recent survey found. New findings have suggested that the majority of U.S. millennials are living paycheck to paycheck as a result of ongoing personal and economic hardships. A joint survey by PYMNTS and Lending Club found that 60.1% of surveyed consumers were living within tight financial budgets, with millennials, those between the ages of 27 and 42, making up 73.2% of the surveyed group. Officials also determined the financial strain also befell 64.2% of Generation X and 49.5% of baby boomers. Generation Z, which accounts for those born between 1997 and 2012, made up 65.5% of individuals dealing with money restrictions, an 8% increase from the year prior. Baby boomers are described as any individual between 1946 and 1964, with Generation X accounting for others born from 1965 to 1980. The oldest millennials are in their 40s now and often manage expenses for not just their kids but also aging parents, Anuj Nair, a financial health officer at Lending Club, told U.S. media. As for the reasons for such a distressing situation, most often, 38.4%, respondents cited having salaries that were just enough to pay basic bills. However, more than a quarter of the respondents also indicated their situation was caused by the need to pay for other family members and significant accrued debts. The financial strain for many was further complicated by the fact that many Americans lost their cash savings during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, when many lost their main source of income or had to take pay cuts to make ends meet. 1/3 of consumers report that they are currently not saving any money, with 60% of these consumers also saying they have no pre-existing savings, the report reads. Additionally, half of financially struggling consumers are unable to save and have no savings. Despite the financial hardships, the report also outlined that millennials are most capable of performing well in managing their finances as their average savings last month amounted to $11,000, up from $7,300 a year earlier. Overall, retirement and covering unforeseen emergencies were cited as the most significant reasons for creating savings. Among all consumers, the most important reason for setting short-term saving goals is to repay debt. Financially struggling consumers are the most likely to cite paying off debt as their most important motivation, adds the report. The results of the report were collected from March 8 to 17 and based on a census-balanced survey of 3,363 U.S. consumers. Retired Admiral urges Turkey to leave NATO. Turkey became a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, in 1952 amidst the dawn of the Cold War. However, many questioned the prudence of entering this obviously militaristic bloc. The West poses a greater threat to Turkey, taking into account its support for attempts to create a separatist Kurdish state, claimed retired Admiral Cem Gideniz in an interview. He added that Ankara must immediately leave NATO. Referring to the beginning of the clandestine war by the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, coined a terrorist organization by Ankara in 1984, Gideniz stated that Western countries do not support Turkey in the ongoing conflict. How many thousands of people have died in the southeast of Turkey since 1984, how many problems Turkey has in other areas, but we do not receive any support from NATO or the EU, said the retired admiral. He added that statements on Turkey made by EU authorities or the US Senate made it clear who is our friend and who is our enemy. The Turkish admiral voiced his concern that NATO might drag Ankara into a conflict via the Ukrainian crisis. He alleged that in this case, Turkey would be forced to close the straits for Russia and this would be a casus belli for full-scale conflict between Russia and NATO with use of tactical nuclear weapons. Gideniz believes that NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg realizes the risk, but he is an American puppet, and that's why he rushes to admit Ukraine to NATO. He also stated that the US had been using Ankara since 1945, and before that the United Kingdom had treated Turkey the same way. He believes that his country must get rid of this Anglo-Saxon dependence at any reasonable cost and pursue its own independent policy, balancing between the Atlantic and Asia. At the same time, the retired admiral admitted that withdrawal from NATO would mean inevitable conflict with Greece. However, an even bigger threat to regional security comes from the reported Western project of turning the Black Sea into a NATO lake. Gideniz slammed NATO for misleading Turkey about USSR goals and casting the Kremlin in black tones. The aim of this policy was to turn Turkey into a Western satellite, he claimed. He believes that Turkey should forge a geopolitical alliance with Russia, China, and India and develop closer contacts with other BRICS countries. Musk gives 6 to 8 week timeline for next Starship flight. SpaceX's Starship spacecraft underwent a setback after the craft exploded during its first test flight. However, company CEO Elon Musk has stated the damage caused by the explosion was quite small. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk revealed Saturday that the company expects to conduct another Starship launch in about 6 to 8 weeks and spend roughly $2 billion on rocket development just this year. The spacecraft was launched atop a Super Heavy rocket booster and was expected to separate from the booster before continuing its ascent towards space. However, the historic launch ended with an explosion after the Starship prototype experienced multiple engine failures, prompting the vehicle's flight termination system to be triggered. The incident proved a significant setback for SpaceX's plans to use the Starship spacecraft to transport humans to Mars and beyond. The company had hoped to use the spacecraft to carry out crewed missions as early as 2023, but the timeline now appears unlikely. The vehicle's structural margins appear to be better than we expected, Musk admitted during a discussion on Twitter Spaces. As we can tell, the vehicle is actually doing somersaults towards the end and still staying intact. Despite the setback, Musk remains optimistic about the future of the Starship program, indicating SpaceX will continue to refine the design and conduct further tests in the coming months. The company has already built several prototypes of the Starship spacecraft, with each iteration incorporating improvements based on previous tests. In the wake of the explosion, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration issued a statement explaining that the agency was forced to shutter the immediate area around the launch base due to launch pad safety concerns. The area remained closed for a period of 48 hours, with staff allowed to return to the vicinity to examine the damages on April 22. Investigations into the cause of the mishap remain ongoing, with SpaceX engineers poring over telemetry data. The company has not yet released any details about the specific cause of the engine failures. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson earlier told a House committee hearing that SpaceX believed it would be at least 2 months to rebuild the launch pad, with the same amount of time being given to prepare another launch vehicle. Despite the setback, SpaceX remains one of the most innovative companies in the aerospace industry. The company has made significant strides in recent years, launching numerous successful missions to the International Space Station and developing reusable rockets that have dramatically reduced the cost of space flight. With its ambitious plans for the Starship spacecraft, SpaceX is poised to play a key role in shaping the future of space exploration. Employers to cut 14 million workplaces worldwide by 2027, World Economic Forum. Employers across the globe are planning to create 69 million workplaces by 2027, while shutting down 83 million, which would result in a disappearance of 14 million workplaces or 2% of current global employment, a fresh report by the World Economic Forum has shown. Of the 673 million jobs reflected in the dataset in this report, respondents expect structural job growth of 69 million jobs and a decline of 83 million jobs. This corresponds to a net decrease of 14 million jobs, or 2% of current employment, the report read. The report said that the three key drivers of the net job destruction were expected slower economic growth, supply shortages, rising cost of inputs, and the surging living cost for consumers. Employers also recognize that increased geopolitical divisions and the ongoing impact of the COVID-19 pandemic will drive labor market disruption, with an even split between employers expecting these to have a positive and negative impact on jobs, the document also said. It added that artificial intelligence was expected to be used by nearly 75% of those surveyed companies and was forecast to lead to high churn, with 50% of organizations expecting it to create job growth and 25% expecting it to create job losses. The Future of Jobs Report 2023 includes the results of a survey conducted among 803 companies that collectively employ more than 11.3 million workers across 27 industry clusters and 45 economies from all world regions. Higher body temperature restricts 2 Omicron variants replication, study. Japanese scientists have found that the replicative capacity of 2 SARS-CoV-2 Omicron variants significantly decreases at 40 degrees Celsius, compared with that at 37 degrees Celsius, the normal human body temperature. It may be one of the possible reasons why Omicron variants are less pathogenic than the Delta ones, the study said. Led by the University of Tokyo, the researchers compared the replicative capacity of one Delta variant B.1.617.2 and 2 Omicron variants BA.5 and BQ.1.1 in the presence of a fever, one of the most common symptoms in people who are infected with SARS-CoV-2. They infected human alveolar epithelial cells, AECs, generated from induced pluripotent stem cells with the 3 variants, then incubated them at 2 different temperatures, 37 degrees Celsius, a normal body temperature, and 40 degrees Celsius, elevated human body temperature during illness. All 3 variants had similar growth kinetics on human AECs at 37 degrees C, said the researchers in their study published in the Lancet Microbe Journal. Notably, although the viral titers of B.1.617.2 at 2 dpi were 10 times lower at 40 degrees Celsius than at 37 degrees Celsius, viral titers of BA.5 were 1,000 times lower at 40 degrees Celsius than at 37 degrees Celsius, and BQ.1.1 was unable to replicate at the higher temperature in human AECs, read the study. They said higher body temperature might substantially restrict the replication of the 2 Omicron variants in the lungs, which could have an important role in limiting disease severity. Further study is needed to find the determinants responsible for the temperature sensitivity of SARS-CoV-2 variants, which could lead to a better understanding of viral pathogenesis, they added. Researchers warn of fake news apocalypse ahead, fueled by AI. Futurologists have long been warning about text apocalypse, a situation when the web will be flooded with AI-generated texts and these will be used to train new AI to generate even more text. It seems that the future is almost here. Researchers from NewsGuard have identified almost 50 websites populated by AI tools which post inaccurate or absolutely fake information. The real problem, however, is not the false information itself, but the fact that such sites disguise themselves as news outlets, taking generic names like Daily Business Post and pretending to be a trusted player in the media market. For instance, a controversial website reporting on celebrities' deaths published an article on April 2 stating that POTUS Joe Biden had passed away peacefully in his sleep with Kamala Harris succeeding the office. The article has been removed as its inaccuracy was too obvious, but a cache of the text can be found. The overwhelming majority of such websites are nothing more than AI-powered content farms. They generate low-quality texts, populated with keywords to attract advertising revenues. The majority of such content farms generate low to zero profits. However, a solid portion of them run programmatic ads, which means that AI buys and sells space for advertising automatically, and this means that the owner of such sites gains a source of passive income. Also, some companies practice guest posting, which means that they pay money to such content farms for mentioning their name in order to enhance their search ranking. Gordon Krovitz, a prominent American journalist and expert on big tech, reportedly said that using AI models known for making up facts to produce what only look like news websites is fraud masquerading as journalism. Researchers are also concerned about the fact that such content-generating tools are becoming virtually free. Noah Giansiracusa, an associate professor of data science and mathematics at Bentley University, was quoted in the media as saying that fake news for ads used to be a low-paid scheme and perpetrators had to invest at least some resources to commit this crime, at least to pay regular salary to media school's dropouts. Now all they need is a computer connected to the internet. Japanese authorities doubtful of removal process of Fukushima radioactive sandbags. Japanese authorities have expressed doubt over the removal of radioactive sandbags at the Fukushima nuclear plant as the plant operator aims to start the recycling procedure this fiscal year, NHK reported on Monday. Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority said the recycling approach needs to be fully verified, adding that it was unclear whether the procedure can be carried out as expected. The zeolite-packed sandbags were put on the basement floors of the factory building as an emergency measure to lower radiation levels of contaminated water after the 2011 nuclear disaster. Although their radiation levels have weakened with time, the sandbags can still emit radiation levels of up to 4.4 sieverts per hour, which could kill people exposed to the high reading for 2 hours. The plant operator Tokyo Electric Power Co. TEPCO plans to use robots to collect the sandbags and store them in other receptacles. The company is expecting the plan to be approved in September. The regulator said tests need to be carried out this summer to verify the plan's safety. Astronomers spot black hole devouring a star. The Tittle disruption event is the closest to be discovered to date. Astronomers from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, have detected a rare space phenomenon that occurs when a supermassive black hole consumes a star. The event occurred in galaxy NGC 7392 located about 137 million light-years away. The so-called tidal disruption events, TDE, of which about 100 have been observed by astronomers to date, become visible as a burst of light is emitted when a black hole expels a vast quantity of radiation while feasting upon stellar matter. According to a press release by MIT, the TDE spotted in the NGC 7392 galaxy, designated as WTP-14 at J-Share, became the closest such event to be discovered so far. While TDEs usually stand out on the optic and X-ray spectrum, due to the nature of the radiation emitted in the process, WTP-14 at J-Share was instead visible on infrared due to the fact that the light produced by a star's demise being absorbed by space dust that gave off the heat that the astronomers detected. The press release also pointed out that WTP-14 at J-Share occurred in an active, star-forming galaxy, with few such TDEs being observed so far, with this find potentially suggesting that a search in the infrared band might reveal more TDEs in such galaxies. Finding this nearby TDE means that, statistically, there must be a large population of these events that traditional methods were blind to, said Christos Panagiotou, a postdoc in MIT's Kavli Institute for Astrophysics and Space Research. So, we should try to find these in the infrared if we want a complete picture of black holes and their host galaxies.